Happy Spooktober, everyone! And what better way to celebrate than with off-putting stop-motion films? Stop motion is arguably the most satisfying style of animation in the medium. The amount of skill and talent that goes into creating a performance and story one pose at a time is almost as insane as, say, Loving Vincent. The House is a 3-part horror comedy anthology film from Nexus Studios in London, and it details the spooky phenomena surrounding this one peculiar house. And it's, gonna be honest, it's not as good as I thought it would be. I don't hate it. Not at all. In fact, this has become one of my rainy day movies. Films that I never get tired of and can just pop on at any time, like Song of the Sea, Red Turtle, Triplets of Belleville, and, of course, The House. There's something about its unsettling atmosphere that really captivates me. It's the coziest horror film I've ever seen. But it's still got some flaws in its second and third short films. Flaws that I will detail as we go through and discuss. And after I've reviewed each short, I'll be discussing the film's overall themes, how they tie into each other, and how well they were executed. So, without further ado, let us venture into The House. Oh, also, I think it goes without saying, but I'll also be spoiling the hell out of this. Sorry, but I kinda have to in order to, fully analyze it. But it's on Netflix, so, you can do that. You can look it up on there if you want. Alright. So, all the shorts in this movie are connected by a poem written by Enda Walsh, who also wrote the movie. The poem is as follows: "And heard within, a lie is spun, then lost is truth that can't be won. Listen again, and seek the sun." I'll dissect this later, but for now, let's focus on the first film, directed by Emma de Swaif and Mark Roels. This short is actually my favorite and easily the best of the three, which is, unfortunate that the movie doesn't get much better than this. It centers around a lower middle-class family, Raymond, Penelope, Mabel, and Isabel. They are visited by their shitty aunts and cousins. These posh assholes belittle and undermine the whole family, but especially Raymond and his father. All the while, Mabel tries her best to accommodate her ungrateful elders. This feud pushes Raymond to drink that very night and go out wandering to wallow in his own misery. But suddenly, a carriage appears out of nowhere, and a mysterious man lures Raymond in. The next morning, it's revealed that Raymond actually made a deal with a certain Mr. Van Schoonbeek to have him construct a luxurious house for the unfortunate family. They are visited by the associate of Van Schoonbeek, Mr. Thomas, who gets the parents to sign the necessary papers. The family make their way to the new home where all seems grand and welcoming, if not a tad suspicious. The parents are more than happy to indulge in this new house and all of its amazing food and accessories, while Mabel is left uneasy by the strange aura and creepy contract workers that infest the house. They have their first dinner in the house, and it becomes clear that the parents are like moths to a flame. They fall right into the clutches of Van Schoonbeek's design. As the short goes on, the layout of the house starts to change as to meet Mr. Van Schoonbeek's artistic vision. The stairs go missing, rooms are shuffled about, and the hallways have holes in them. The parents are unaware of these changes and the strange antics going on because they're too enveloped in the glory of the abode. Thankfully, the house is still recognizable enough for Mabel to find her parents, who are now being dressed up in ridiculous get-ups as per Van Schoonbeek's request. Get-ups that look suspiciously like home furnishings. Mabel voices her frustrations with her parents and this house, saying she wishes they never moved here. But it's to no avail. tale, as the parents are dead set on their new life here. That night, the baby Isabel goes searching throughout the house for something as Mabel follows. They make their way down to the basement where they find a room with all their old possessions. This leads to a really nice scene where Mabel reads her sister a bedtime story and offers a small bit of levity from the creepiness of this house. But it doesn't last long, as when they awake, the layout of the house has changed again, and this time it's completely incoherent. To make matters worse, the parents have next to no regard for the well-being of their kids, and Raymond even starts burning their old possessions to get the fireplace started. Coming up now is my favorite scene. As Mabel and Isabel make their way through the dark hallways of this ever-changing maze, they come across a broken Mr. Thomas, who starts raving like a madman to the poor children that Mr. Van Schoenbeek has changed everything again, and that he himself is just an actor, and he can't keep up this facade anymore. It's as terrifying as it is twistedly hilarious, and it really solidifies the hopelessness of the situation. Without anything left to do, the two girls decide to sleep on the cold floorboards, until they awaken to the main living room with the fireplace. This is where they discover a horrifying sight. Their parents have become permanent accessories to Van Schoenbeek's house. And my god, this shit is spine-tingling as all hell, but like in kind of a funny way. The girls look upon this sight in horror as the fire starts to spread throughout the room. The mother, using her curtain body, offers the children a way to escape this hell. They make their way across the snow and away from the burning house. They look in awe at this monstrous building that absorbed their parents as the sun rises, drawing this short to a grim close.
What was that?
There's nothing like a good old-timey British horror story to show your children before bed. I love this short, and like I said at the beginning, it's no doubt the best of the three. This entry is paced with a wonderful slow burn that eases you into the creepiness perfectly. And while she's not the most complex character, Mabel is a very sympathetic MC. She's so young and powerless that you really root for her to survive the whole way through. And the atmosphere is just beautiful. Atmosphere and tone are essential to get right when it comes to horror. I dare say it's just as important as the writing. And this short beautifully conveys a sense of omnipotence and dread that encompasses the entire 30 minutes. This is mainly thanks to the antagonist of the short, the mysterious Mr. Van Schoenbeek. This fucking guy would have given me nightmares if I had seen this movie as a kid. This puffy-faced contract-making interior design craftsman-ass motherfucker just fills me to the brim with bad vibes. He lurks in the shadows, giggling like a fucking hyena. He can change his size. His entire being is tied to the house. And we don't know exactly what he is, how he made the house so fast, or how he got all these contract workers, or Mr. Thomas under his reign. I mean, we can assume that they were unfortunate souls like Raymond, and Van Schoenbeek promised them prosperity and good fortune, only to be, become slaves, essentially. But in Raymond and Penelope's case, he wanted them to become furniture, which is as comedic as it is horrific. And tragic, cause these parents are essentially dead. Like, that fire was spreading and they're both flammable. God, these poor kids. I wish I could give them a cookie. Anyway, Mr. Van Schoenbeek scares the confetti piss out of me, and he really helps elevate the creep factor of this fantastic short film. I give this one a gold star that says excellent. Hey, it's me. I'm showing up in between review segments. How original and new. Alright, next up is Then Lost is Truth That Can't Be Won. And it's not very good. I really tried to give this one the benefit of the doubt, but much like Detective Story or Matriculated from the Animatrix, this short film left me rather underwhelmed. end. And the thing is, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, it sets up one thing with all these bugs in the house, but pays off something completely different. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's dive in. This short was directed by Nikki Lindroth von Barr, and it centers around an anxious, doting developer trying to make this abode as lush and presentable as possible for the open house he's hosting in a few days. But that hasn't been going very well. His shipments and orders are constantly getting delayed and mixed up, the people he talks to over the phone seem to purposefully screw with him, and to top it all off, beetles have completely infested the house. And I mean completely, like they cover every square inch of the fucking place. It is a problem. Also, he seems to be very attached to this one particular person on the phone who he keeps calling sweetheart, but that'll be paid off later. So it's not going well for the guy, but despite this, he still puts on a fresh facade to everyone who enters the house. He keeps fumbling his presentation until he's approached by a rather odd rodent couple. They are extremely interested in this house, and their demeanor is just, well, they're just creepy. However, the developer doesn't really clue into their creepiness because he's just happy someone wants to buy his house, or so he thinks. The odd couple decide to stay the night in the house, which the developer reluctantly agrees to. But as the days go on, the odd couple simply refuse to leave, and this leads to our protagonist delving further into insanity. The developer keeps calling his sweetheart, hoping they can somehow remedy the situation, but this leads to him having a full-on mental breakdown. He falls on the floor, which leads to, this non sequitur. Yeah, so someone saw the mouse scene from Coraline. This scene comes out of bloody nowhere and is easily the most awkward, tacked-on part of the film. Like, yeah, it's impressive, I guess, that this is a lot to animate, but it doesn't really serve any purpose other than to be weird and random. It doesn't further the plot or really even have an effect on the developer. It's pointless. It's goddamn pointless. And every time I watch this movie, I admittedly fast forward through this scene cause, like, it just stops the movie dead in its tracks. Anyway, after that, the developer finally grows a spine and decides to confront the two and says he's calling the police. To his amazement, the police show up straight away, but for completely different reasons. These officers are responding to a complaint the developer's dentist made, saying he keeps calling him to complain about his life struggles and refers to him as sweetheart. Aha! You see, that's who he was on the phone with. He was on the phone with his dentist, calling them sweetheart and darling, and that's funny. That's funny because, like, why would anyone do that? That's so wacky and funny. Haha. Man, I'm glad I waited for that payoff. That was great. So, yeah, after the police leave, family members of the odd couple show up to the house, and this is the last straw for the developer. He tries to outright fucking poison the odd couple with bug killer, only to open the jug on himself and get himself hospitalized. The odd couple then go to his room to bring him home, which at this point he sheepishly submits. He's greeted with applause by the odd couple's family, but it would seem that some of them have extra limbs like those bugs from earlier. Soon enough, they all succumb to their animalistic urges and completely devour every inch of the house. The developer, who has reverted back to his feral ways, digs a deep hole from inside his oven, bringing the short to an end.
What did we learn, Palmer?
I don't know, sir.
I don't fucking know either.
This one did not work for me. Why did they set up all this stuff with the bugs in the house only to completely ignore them and have them replaced by the weird family? Like, at first I thought the bugs were inside these rodent suits, like they were trying to infiltrate the house, but that didn't happen. At least I don't think that's what happened. Is the short saying that the bugs and the odd family are one and the same? Did the bugs, like, fucking transform into these rat creatures? I don't know! I guess it's supposed to be ambiguous to add to the weird or creep factor, but, yeah, that kinda leaves me scratching my head. And you may be thinking, oh, unicorn, you dumbass. You're just thinking about it too literally and not thematically. Yeah, I am. That's what I do. I'll explore the themes later, but themes should never be a crutch in which the immediate story walks with. This short is not very well thought out in terms of its setups and payoffs. The humor doesn't really work for me, and while the atmosphere does succeed in creating an anxiety-inducing, uncomfortable aura, it's not enough to carry this weak script. The one thing I find myself liking in this short is the developer character. His struggle to try and succeed despite the constant setbacks thrown at him is mildly amusing, but aside from that, this is definitely the weakest link in the film, and the biggest thing holding it back from being truly great. Thankfully, this next short is much better. Is a lot. You see, let's just get to it. And so we come to the last entry. I hope you like cats. Last one on the docket is Listen Again and Seek the Sun, directed by Paloma Beza. And the more I've revisited this short, the more I've really taken a liking to it. Unfortunately, it's plagued with some damning issues that, once again, hold it back from being great. But I do love the calm, meditative atmosphere, the blend of stop motion and CG, and I really like the protagonist, Rosa. She's definitely the most identifiable and tangible of all the characters in this film. And not to mention, probably the only landlord you'll ever feel sympathy for. And the reason for that is, god damn it, this woman cares about her house. We learn from a great exposition shot that she inherited this house from her parents, and she tries her best to make it welcoming, warm, and livable for herself and her tenants, simply out of sheer passion and hard work. However, this house is on the brink of being flooded, and no matter how hard she tries, she can't make this place work the way she wants, which very much discourages her. And to make matters even more frustrating, her tenants, Elias and Jen, don't have any money to pay her rent, so they settle for fish and obsidian crystals, which are, useless to Rosa. Rosa sits down to have breakfast with Jen where they discuss the difficulties of keeping this house together. All her past tenants left due to the flooding, which from the opening shots we can see have encompassed the entire world. Rosa, however, seems to be in serious denial about the flooding and the state of the house, thinking everything is still salvageable. And this, as we will see explored, is the core flaw of her character. She's very narrow-minded about what the house and her life should be, and she leaves very little room for opposing opinions. But what endears us to her is how devoted she is to her vision, and how much she doesn't take shit from others. She's very no-nonsense, and in many ways, responds how the average everyday person would respond to the insanity she faces throughout the short. The next day, Jen's spirit partner, Cosmos, arrives by boat at the house, and awakens Rosa with his throat singing. Cosmos is a typical hippy-dippy archetype that has an arsenal of tricks and unassuming skills up his sleeve. He first comes off as a nuisance to Rosa, but once she finds out he's a part-time carpenter, she decides to use him to help fix this house. Little does she know he has ulterior motives. The next morning, to Rosa's horror, the entire upstairs corridor has been completely taken apart and used to construct a boat for Elias. Rosa has a full-on conniption about this, understandably, but Cosmos, Elias, and Jen are far too caught up in the excitement to really acknowledge Rosa's anger. Right after, Rosa yells at Elias to fix the corridor right away, but Elias tries to convince Rosa that there's no use in him living here anymore. The water is rising little by little every day, and Rosa keeps denying the inevitable. None of them can live in this house anymore. Rosa is noticeably heartbroken by by this because, whether or not she wants to admit it, these tenants are the only friends she has. Plus, she's still in hard denial about the flooding. She storms off back into the house, angered and deeply saddened by the situation. This scene is a great example of why I love Rosa. She stands up for herself while still showing she's clearly hurt. It's a perfect mix of a firm demeanor with vulnerability, and this is strengthened by the wonderful voice performance from Susan Wokoma. Fantastic job on her part. Rosa reluctantly gets back to work on the house as Elias takes his leave. She feels guilty that they didn't get a chance to have a proper goodbye, but tries to justify it by saying he was never of any help around the building. That's when she discovers a lever Cosmos installed, which will come into play later. Rosa goes to Elias's room where she discovers a parting note from him and, surprisingly, drawings he made of her and Jen. I really like this scene. It's tender moments like this and the storybook scene from the first entry that make me return to this film so frequently. There's an air of sentimentality and softness that contributes to that cozy feeling I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Jen and Rosa have one final conversation before she leaves with Cosmos. Jen tries to assure her that there's hope out there, but Rosa still refuses any attempt at a supposed salvation. That is until Jen lets in the mist and holy shit, what the fuck, oh my god, oh Jesus, what's going on, oh my god. But this scene actually does serve a purpose. It shows Rosa what her life will ultimately become if she chooses to stay in the house. She'll end up alone, scared, and more than likely dead from the flooding. After she awakens from this epiphany soul trip, she realizes Jen and Cosmos have already left. Rosa finally confesses to herself that she wants to leave, but fears that she can't. That is until she leans on the lever from earlier and soon enough activates a whole procedure in which the house turns into a boat. Okay, you're all gonna hate me for this, but how the fuck did Cosmos fucking do that? How did he do that? I don't care how good at carpentry you are, this straight up does not make sense. What, he was able to make this whole broken-ass house into a buoyant fucking mechanism in less than 24 hours? Fixing the plumbing? Yeah. Ripping up a whole corridor in one morning? Douchey, but still, he's a carpenter, I can buy that. This, on top of everything else he did throughout the short, that's a bit of a stretch for me. Some of you may think I'm nitpicking, but I kinda disagree, cause this is a literal plot point in the film. Anyway, so yeah, the house turns into a boat, her friends meet up with her, and they all drift off into the vast unknown as the sun shines down on them.
Hold it! Hold everything!
Okay, there's a bit to unpack here, mainly with the ending. And you know, it's not the fact that the house turns into a boat that frustrates me, not even the improbability of Cosmos accomplishing that feat. What frustrates me is that this betrays the previous scene with Rosa's cerebral trip and one of the themes of the short, the theme of moving on from your past. Throughout this whole entry, everyone either hints at or straight up tells Rosa that there's no use in living here anymore because A, the house doesn't work, it's a total wreck, and B, the flooding is overtaking fucking everything. Jen even outwardly states, love your past, but move forward. And then Rosa proceeds to have a premonition about her dark future in the house. So this ending of the house turning into a boat doesn't really mesh with everything else because now Rosa has to stay tied to the house in order to survive. Like, I don't know, maybe it would be better if Rosa ripped up parts of the house herself to make her own boat or a raft to escape. I think that might have worked just fine. That way, she's taking the initiative to shape her future away from the house and taking something that once caused her grief and turning it into something positive. And also, you could still have her meet up with her friends and have it be a hopeful, optimistic ending. After Rosa's whole arc of being in denial and refusing to move on from the house and being told to move on from the house, you'd think the natural conclusion would be to, well, you know, move on from the house. But instead, Cosmos made the house a boat, and now Rosa can literally never let go of it. It doesn't sit right with me. Feel free to disagree with me in the comments, but I'll explore the themes further in the section coming up. Yet, despite those issues with the writing, I still weirdly like this short. It's pretty surface level, but I like the aesthetic, tone, and the character of Rosa, even if her arc's conclusion doesn't make that much sense. It's a bit of an indulgence for me, this short. It doesn't really work, but you know, I'll still give it a good old pat on the back. Overall, I give this one an E for effort. Okay, now it's time to talk about the themes. And boy, does this movie have them. Themes are all well and good, but just having themes doesn't excuse any flaws with the narrative. I love dissecting themes, but they need to be executed well in order for me to have something meaningful to talk about. And the best way to execute whatever themes you want conveyed is to have them support the events and character decisions in your story. Some great examples of this are, well, quite honestly, the 3 films I listed at the beginning of the video: Song of the Sea, Red Turtle, and Triplets. They all have stories that are supported by their themes and vice versa. But even so, the stories aren't dependent on the themes in order to work. I bring all this up because the house's themes are rather muddled in the second and third stories. The main through line in every short seems to be either the dangers of materialism or the struggles of monetary security. And in the first entry, that's actually clearly communicated and supported. The unfortunate family are clearly in financial stress and live in a rather cluttered, stuffy home. It isn't until Raymond is promised a grand house from Van Schoenbeek that his avarice starts to surface. Raymond and Penelope become addicted to the new materials they've acquired from moving into their new house. They become so enraptured in the rush of materialism that their possessions literally consume them. This is, of course, a comedic exaggeration, but the theme is clear and supported by the events in the story. The money and materialism theme certainly does carry through in the second short. The developer has unpaid bills on the wall, he keeps missing calls from the bank, and he uses the veil of his upscale materials to distract from the horrors that lie beneath. I've heard theories that the moral here is supposed to be that if you repress the negativity or bad fortune in your life and try to disguise it with a false facade, it'll eventually blow up in your face and make matters worse. Which is all fine and good, but as I've said before, the execution of this story leaves me and the message rather confused. If that moral is what we're supposed to take from this, why not have the Beatles be the one consistent threat throughout? Why shift gears with the odd couple and family? It completely boinks the message, because now I'm thinking the message is don't let weird fucks into your house. Like I said before, this short doesn't really work on a narrative level, and no amount of themes or deeper meaning can really save it from that. Moving on to the third one, the theme of monetary struggle is present, but not much of it is explored aside from Rosa not getting her rent money. The materialism theme doesn't really seem to have a place here, however, because the actual story is centered on Rosa's denial and acceptance of her situation. This short is definitely the most disjointed of all 3 on a thematic level, and as I've said before, its own moral gets muddled in a contradictive conclusion. And it being disjointed is even more of a problem when you remember that all of these shorts are supposed to be linked by a poem, which, speaking of, let's dissect. So each verse of the poem, I assume, is supposed to describe what happens in each short. And Heard Within, A Lie is Spun, is meant to reference the lie Van Schoenbeek coaxes the family into. Then Lost is Truth, That Can't Be Won, references the loss of sanity the developer goes through. Listen Again and Seek the Sun is referencing Rosa's arc to listen to her friends to find freedom. Individually, these titles serve their purposes, but what is the poem as a whole saying? Well, if we're to take the materialism and money themes to heart, my best guess, and I'm being generous here, is that money and materialism can spin a lie that makes you lose your truth, and in order to escape this turmoil, you must listen again or look deeper to find salvation. Well, I can safely say I've done worse mental gymnastics than that, but I mean, I suppose this could work if all 3 stories were well executed. The problem with this film is that even though there are similar through lines in each story, they thin out as the film goes on and don't go any farther than materialism and money are troubling, which is not a bad message to have. Like, yeah, we all got money troubles, and we all want new prestigious things. But if we tunnel vision ourselves to those things, it can lead to our ruin. Again, not a bad message, but not necessarily a unique one either. And aside from the first short, that theme isn't strongly communicated. So, what am I saying? What I'm saying is the house is not very good. It's rather rickety when it comes to the execution of its storytelling. I still derive a good deal of enjoyment from it, but I can't in confidence call this a good film. There's just far too much thematic inconsistency. But with all that said, I still eagerly await whatever stop-motion projects and digital animation projects Nexus Studios has planned. They've proven themselves extremely competent when it comes to smooth, immersive animation. And like I said before, the visuals are no doubt the strongest part of this film. I'll definitely be keeping an eye on this studio for potential future reviews, as they certainly have piqued my interest. And even though this film may not be their best writing effort, you can tell this is the product of wanting to tell a story and not a product of focus group meddling. So overall, on the good old 1 to 10 scale, I give this one a 7 for personal enjoyment and a 4 or 5 for objective quality. Probably closer to a 4. Is that mean? Am I mean? No, I'm not. I think I was very fair throughout this video. My mother is proud of me, so fuck you. Thanks for watching. Happy Halloween, and be sure to hand out plenty of Scotch bonnets to all the children. Hey, you see the buttons? You see the fucking buttons? Press the buttons! Press the fucking buttons! Do it! Do it right now! Put your whole dick inside of it!